Rece Davis with us now. He's joining us through the tournament on this show here, presented by MyBookie.ag, code next round. MyBookie.ag, code next round when you sign up for that sign-on bonus up to $2,000. What's happening, Rece? How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing awesome, just like you drew it up going to Houston, right, with this Final Four. No surprises at all.
Well, second highest seed total in the history of the tournament. And I think probably the most unlikely group. None of the top three seeds making the tournament. So the top 12 teams, according to seed, not in there, though I kind of differed with the seeding on UConn a little bit. I understood it because they had that stretch in the middle of the season in which they lost 6 out of 8. But that's, from a talent standpoint, that's a top 2 seed line team easily. So, but yeah, some great stories, some unexpected ones for sure, and just a remarkable thing. I have this theory about the tournament that it just came upon me as I was thinking about Kansas State's Elite 8 hex, Alabama's Sweet 16 hex, if you want to call it that. And I have this theory now that unless your team wins the national championship, the tournament, as great as it is designed to make you unhappy.
Oh, wow.
Because here's the thing, is like I'm watching the Kansas State Florida Atlantic game the other day, for instance. And there's a big part of you that's rooting for Florida Atlantic because it's Florida Atlantic. They might go to the Final Four, right? But as soon as it happens, because you don't really have a dog in the race, and I wasn't working, so I didn't get to flip that switch where you're just sort of observing, without the emotion coming in. And as soon as they won, you're like, well, now this stinks. Kansas State lost in the Elite 8 again, and Marquise Newell's not going to get to play anymore, and now I'm unhappy they're not there. Same thing happened with Texas and Miami. You're rooting for the comeback until it happens, and then after it happens, you are sort of happy for Miami, but you feel awful for Texas. So unless your team cuts down the nets, the tournament is designed to inflict as much agony as possible on you just as a casual observing fan.
Yeah, Tom Stipe, longtime Alabama engineer on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. That was the exact conversation we had the other night leaving the Yum Center. We're walking down the hallway. He's pulling all of his equipment, and then he's like, this tournament, I love it, but I hate it because unless you win it, you leave upset.
I do think that if Alabama had made the Final Four this year, there would have been some disappointment, but not upset. If they'd gone to the Elite 8, there would have been some heartache. Going out in the round in which all of their good teams have gone out, their best teams. And I know one team made the Elite 8, and I would argue, and I'll probably get a call from Petway after this, but I would argue that all the teams that made the Sweet 16, that was probably the least likely one to have advanced. And I still believe this, and they should do this at Alabama. They should declare themselves, because I know anti-Alabama fans will believe this anyway, they do this anyway. They should declare themselves some type of champion for 2004, because there are only 2 teams in each tournament that maximize, their path. It's usually, well, I won't say 2 teams. One team's usually the champion. That team maximized its path because Pet's going to kill me for this. They could have played UConn 100 times in 2004 and been 0-100. They would never, ever, ever have beaten that UConn team. Never, ever, ever. So they did. They beat a number 1 seed. They advanced past the Sweet 16. There should be a special banner for that one, like maybe best team not named UConn 2004, something like that.
Rece, I said this yesterday, not always the best team wins this tournament. It's that difficult. And I still think the best teams in college basketball this year are Alabama, Houston, and UConn. But what threw me off on UConn, and my bracket, like everyone's, is a complete mess, is how did this team lose 6 of 8 in the regular season, including losses to St. John's and Seton Hall?
It's a long year, man. Kevin Keats told me this year, North Carolina State coach. Now, that 6 of 8 is more than what you're talking about here. But he said you can count on 2 games a year where your team just doesn't have it, right? And, I'd have to go back and look. I think UConn might have been a little bit banged up. There was probably, just some stuff going on at some point in the season. It sort of happens over the course of the year. But they they found themselves. I mean, I was surprised. I didn't remember that they weren't ranked in the preseason. That seems to be an oversight by the preseason voters, because they may not have McDonald's All-Americans on that team, and they don't, but they've got elite talent. And they've got a bunch of different answers. I, like you, thought that the two teams that had the most answers were Alabama and UConn in terms of being able. They've got multiple bigs. They had multiple guys could make baskets. But look, styles make fights, and Alabama over the course of the year showed to be somewhat vulnerable to the style that San Diego State plays. And we talked about this a little bit last week. So that's part of the tournament play as well. But as far as how UConn lost 6 of 8, it's hard to imagine with the way they're playing right now. I mean, it really is.
You mentioned this being the second highest seed total for a Final Four. The other one, also in Houston, had Kentucky, so it's a different field than this one, though UConn is a blue blood as well. Is there a chance that FAU and San Diego State years from now has the same respect we now have for Butler and VCU? Because we look back on that one and we go, oh, Butler and VCU, they became pretty household names as it continued on. Is that the path San Diego State and FAU could be on?
I think San Diego State for sure. And I don't want to undermine. And I would even argue that San Diego State already sort of has that. What was missing from their resume was advancing in the tournament because of Mountain West recent history. I guess San Diego State sort of did away with the Mountain West tax. They hadn't even won a game in the tournament. No team in the conference had won a game since 2018, prior to this year in the tournament. So I think they're already there, to be honest with you, Jim. But FAU probably a little more questionable in terms of long term. Not that they can't be good, but Dusty May is going to be a really hot coaching commodity in the future, regardless of what happens this weekend in Houston, and probably regardless of what happens next year. So it's going to be probably a little more difficult to sustain it there, just to be candid about it. But having acknowledged that, this is also the type of thing that can galvanize support and allows you to elevate facilities and recruiting and name brand and all of that type of thing that might make it sustainable. So my answer to that is that San Diego State is sort of already there, and now they've punctuated it by breaking through and making a Final Four, and they maybe they're headed to the Pac-12, depending on how all of that shakes out. FAU, I think it remains to be seen, but there's certainly an opportunity there for them to do something like that, because I would imagine that much like a lot of the other schools in both football and basketball who enjoyed some unexpected success on the national stage, I would imagine that applications for admission will skyrocket as a result of this. It typically does. And then you've got Boca Raton, because not everybody leaves to come to the SIP. Some still want to come to the FAU.
ESPN's Rece Davis with us on the Johnson
tip of the cap to Lane.
Yes, on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Rece joins us each week through the tournament courtesy of MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign up for that sign-on bonus up to $20,000 or $2,000. Excuse me. They just had a stroke there. MyBookie.ag. Code next round. I want to step back from the Final Four for 1 second because, Rece, if I'm a Gonzaga fan, this was not their best team either. But they had a path like they have many, many years. And just being a realistic person, I know these windows don't last forever. They don't stay open forever. And it's just another year where I felt like I had a shot and we couldn't close the deal if I'm a Gonzaga fan. What do you tell that fan?
I think for this team, you tell them that you maximize it, sort of like we were talking about Alabama in 2004.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't match up. I mean, they didn't play their best game. They can play better than that. There's no question about that. But this was not their best team. This is not as good as the team 2 years ago. It's not as good as the team that played Carolina for the championship in 2017. And it's not as good as some of their teams who've gotten beaten early. But they got better over the course of the season, a lot better, to the point where they were a step away from another Final Four. So I don't think they have. I think it's a real compliment to them that their fans would be upset about anything when you consider the last time they played UConn in an Elite Eight. There was whispers and mutters. Are we going to be able to keep the university open? and now it's a thriving university with a blue blood basketball program. And the only thing missing from the Gonzaga resume is a national championship. They've been to the Final Four twice. They've won in the Final Four twice. They just haven't won the final game yet. So I didn't look at this as a real huge opportunity. It was possible. And certainly had they been able to get past UConn, they would have been the favorite, I would imagine, going into this Final Four. But, UConn is pretty easily, to me, the best team left. And look, crazy things happen in the tournament, but I'll be very surprised if UConn doesn't win the national championship Monday night.
It was just this past Friday when these guys were in Louisville. I was here in studio, and we were talking about San Diego State and Alabama, and we were talking about San Diego State's defensive numbers, and everyone was like, well, they haven't played a team like Alabama. The last 10 games, they've only given up over 61 time. What they did against Alabama and Creighton, I mean, it's one of the best defensive runs I've seen in the NCAA tournament. I don't know if you agree or not.
No, I completely agree. It's a remarkable thing. They're very physical. They get all up in you. They take away the 3-point line, which they did to Alabama and to Creighton, for that matter. I think Creighton, Alabama was like 3 of 27, maybe Creighton was 2 of 17 or 2 of 18 or something. It was awful.
Yeah, both 11% behind the arc.
Yeah, both shot very poorly from 3. And there are a couple of things that go with that I think the defense is the primary reason. But even when you get open looks, when you guard the way San Diego State does, maybe you rush, maybe you're more open than you realize. Maybe you're just a little off your rhythm because the shot didn't come in the same rhythm, in the same way you might have expected normally. So you missed some open shots too, which both teams certainly did. But that's also a credit to San Diego State's defense. They're really physical and tough. It's always easier to slow a game down than it is to speed it up. And they do a great job of dictating tempo, and they've got old guys who are big and strong and physical, and they sort of play bully ball. And that's what they did particularly against Alabama, and they did a good job of it against Creighton. Creighton doesn't play as fast as it did, say, 3-4 years ago, but they still like to get some movement going and some fluid offensive basketball, and San Diego State just would not allow.
Classic voice rules of the television show on NBC here. Do you spin your chair around for Pat McAfee's version of Calling Baton Rouge? He did it on his show yesterday, confirming he's back with you on game day. Do you spin your chair around for him?
Yeah, man, of course. He's my guy. I mean, I spent as soon as I recognize that Pittsburgh draw in there, I'm spinning the chair around and let's go. So maybe if we get there, maybe he'll sing a little Calling Baton Rouge. He did a little singing for us from time to time this year.
Oh, I think it's a given. If you're in Baton Rouge, he's going to sing Calling Baton Rouge. All right, he is ESPN's Rece Davis with us through the tournament. We'll have another visit with Rece next week around the Final Four. Rece, thank you very much for the time. Enjoy Houston.
Okay, see you guys.
All right, buddy, take care. Rece with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. He's presented each week by MyBookie.ag. Don't forget code next round at MyBookie.ag, and you can get a sign-on bonus up to $2,000. $2,000 sign-on bonus up to it right there at MyBookie.ag. That first time you sign up and you use code next round, it's yours and yours forever after one bet. No strings attached. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag, code next round. MyBookie.ag, code next round. UAB a 3.5-point favorite tonight at MyBookie.ag.